take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Glad you're here. Does anyone have like a math teacher you really just hated, didn't like? From the laughter, I'm going to assume there's a lot of yeses in the room. I don't know why I went with math. I could have gone, are there any math teachers in the room? I don't want to offend any math teachers. Could have gone with any subject, really. Show again, sorry, those who had, but did you learn math? Not a trick question.
Yes.
Yes. Who else had a math teacher you didn't like? Did you learn math?
I learned math.
You learned math. Somehow, right? So here's the thing. The thing I love about this practice is that, questions come up very often, all the time. And very often, the questions that arise are very similar, if not the same thing that others are thinking. And so for me, it's one of the reasons I love kind of Q&A type stuff, because for every person who asks a question, there's usually 500 other people that are thinking the same thing at that same moment. And so a question came up recently about, well, who was this guy Siddhartha that they called the Buddha that we're learning about 2,500 years ago, Because he did some things that you probably wouldn't like, right? And if you think it's cool to be married and have a child and then just bail for 6 years, not so cool, right? I mean, today that's kind of frowned upon. You just don't do stuff like that. I mean, it happens. And some of you in the room may have done it. Or some of you in the room may have been the person who had that done to them. But the reality is things like that happen, right? And then here we are 2,500 years later, looking at these teachings that came from a guy that left his wife and child. And so there's this view that you could think like, well, I don't want to learn from that guy. Well, here's the good news. You're not learning from him because he died 2,500 years ago. And he can't teach you anything anymore, right? Now, the reason I bring up the example of a math teacher is that when I look at the life of Siddhartha, who they called the Buddha, right? I'm sure he made mistakes and did things that hurt people just like everybody else. And I'm also pretty sure that he then dedicated and devoted 45 years of his life to teaching a very simple, peaceful journey. And, for me, I look at this and, lots of people come here all these years and, if I sat here and I told you all the things I had done, you would all leave. At least those of you who don't know me, right? So, and everywhere in between. I think it's always important that when we learn something, what you're learning has nothing to do with the person, right? Buddhist practice isn't requiring you to have faith in Siddhartha Gautama, in the Buddha. Now, I could justify and excuse and explain everything he did, but that's not even the point. To me, the real point is Buddhist practice is not about having faith in an individual. The Buddha was not a god. He made that very clear. He didn't ask you to have faith in him. He didn't ask you to have faith in anything or anyone. If anything, who did he want you to have faith in? Yourself. But then he also said there is no self, so he kind of killed that whole idea, right? But this practice isn't about faith. It's not about believing in a religion. It's not about believing in him as like your savior who lived some saintly life, right? It's about the practice. And I think it's always important if you're going to begin, especially for those who maybe are newer to Buddhism, right? You might be into this stuff for like 6 or 9 months, and then you hear the story of the life of the Buddha, and you're like, what? He snuck out in the middle of the night and left his wife and child? Right? And all of a sudden you're just like, well, forget that. Sounds like a lot of heavy judgment to me. You know? Anyone in this room ever done anything wrong? Just 2 of you. Appreciate the 2 hands. Right? So I will add this because, not as an excuse or justification, because I wasn't there. I don't know what was going on. But I will put into context for you a couple things that I do think are important. That, yes, he left home. Yes, he left his wife and child. Yes, he roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years, trying to figure out why we suffer. And then he went back. Keep in mind, at that time, what they all believed as Hindus was that they were all going to be reborn. And as they were going to be reborn, that guaranteed them one thing and one thing only, a life that would be filled with what? Dukkha, suffering. And so he wasn't teaching the path to make sure you had a peaceful, happy day. He was teaching the path so they could learn to free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. Now again, show of hands, how many of you here showed up tonight because you want to make sure you're not going to be reborn? It's not why we come here. But when the Buddha taught 500 years before Christ, that's what he was teaching. Was to teach people how to stop themselves from the cycle of rebirth. So his mother, who actually died at birth, 7 days after he was born, his mother died. His aunt raised him, who married his father, right? And they all became disciples of the Buddha to figure out how to free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. For us, I like to translate that as let's just try to get through each day and suffer less. Right? Whether you believe in rebirth or not has nothing to do with Buddhist practice at all. You can believe in heaven, you can believe in hell, you can believe in whatever you want to believe in. Just learn to be kind. And for me, the Buddhist teachings, that's the heart of it, is teaching us how to be kind and to go beyond judgment, So, I just kind of wanted to share some thoughts on that in case some of you didn't realize that. And last thing I'll say is there was a teacher, there is a pretty well-known teacher, his name is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. I was a Tibetan Buddhist Lama for many years, and Dalai Lama picked him when he was young to be like the savior of, the world with Buddhist teachings. And then after, 40 years or so, he renounced his Tibetan robes and became a layperson and moved to Colorado in the 60s and built what we all know as Shambhala. Now imagine Colorado in the 60s, all right? Colorado, San Francisco, 60s, same thing. And here's this Buddhist guy who'd been a Lama for 40 years and all of a sudden decided to just become one of the people, right? It was madness. It was craziness. There's a great documentary called Crazy Wisdom about him. And the guy lived a crazy life. And I don't support or recommend people do anything that he did living that lifestyle. But his teachings are some of the best I'd ever heard. And I went through a period of about 2 years when I first, I'd read a lot of his stuff, and then I realized, how he lived his life. I was like, never reading his stuff again. Because all I did was judge him. And then I realized, wait a minute, he was doing the same stuff that I was doing. So maybe I shouldn't judge him so quickly. And then I finally came back to realizing that it's not about him. It's about his teachings and his ability to help me understand why I suffer. And so I began to study and learn from him again. Pema Chodron, any of you know her, everybody loves her. She's the queen of Buddhism in America, right? She was a student of Chogyam Trungpa. So when you rattle off all the list of things that Trungpa did that were terrible, and then you look at Pema Chodron and think, how could she have learned from him? So I suggest we just be careful before we start judging people and throwing them under buses, because we don't want people doing that to us, you know. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. There's a couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who are new and to those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box somewhere on your screen. With the meditation practice, nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. There are seats up here if you don't want to go straight to the back, even though you're still going to go, oh, look at that. All right. You'll hear sounds. People will walk in. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. This practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos, right? You won't think nothing. Often people think meditation is about going blank or shutting their mind off. You'd end up sitting there telling yourself, think nothing, think nothing, think nothing, and it's just a waste of time. So I will say things periodically to wake you up because you've fallen asleep, or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten, shoulders relax. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, just trying to sit up straight. If you need to move, simply move. It doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means you need to move. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. Eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. the body still, rested. And the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. Nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, Your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other moment of your life. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation isn't going to fix it. It will help you become aware of why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, so you can then make changes in your life. Meditation is direct perception into the present moment. Learning to be with life as it arises. Life is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. And many people spend their whole life running from them, trying to find something to fix everything. And this practice is learning to be with everything as it is. You might not like how it is, but that's how it is. And we often resist the way things actually are because we crave and desire things to be different from how they are, which is actually impossible. If you want things to be different in the future moving forward, then you make different choices. You work on thoughts, you work on words, you work on actions. It's what the Buddha called karma. Body, speech, mind, what we think, what we say, and what we do. That's the practice, to become aware of that. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, and learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. And that never changes. And that has nothing to do with the Buddha, nothing to do with Donald Duck, Jesus, or anybody for that matter. It has to do with you and your practice and how kind you are to yourself and everybody else. So, with that, I'll pause. I always really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening for questions. For those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Thanks for being here. Theo, you're probably floating in the ocean somewhere. Actually, that didn't sound so good. He's on a boat, so I'm guessing he's in the ocean somewhere. But glad you joined. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in there. So we'll open up to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, whatever's on your mind. Yeah?
I've been running into the word equanimity a lot, and I texted you this week, what does that mean? And you gave me a one-word answer, flexibility. Could you elaborate?
Did I say that? Really?
Yeah, flexibility.
That's pretty good.
It was good.
I forget half the shit I say, so. Yeah, flexibility, that's interesting because it's not usually a word I would have given to that, but it works. Yeah, so equanimity, you look at the Buddhist teachings, it's called the Four Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And when I think of equanimity, for me, it's becoming an observer of a situation, whether we like it or not. Because if we observe a situation and we really like it, how do we feel? We get super happy, excited, right? This is great. But does that situation stay that way? No, it changes. Then we don't feel so good. Then we observe a situation that we don't like, and that makes us feel terrible. That situation also won't stay that way. It will change. That's the good news. So every time I think of equanimity in practice, I also like to apply the Buddhist teachings on impermanence to it. And that so much of our life, we're just struck by what's going on. And so our emotions are all over the place. Someone looks at us a certain way, and it can trigger us. Someone smiles at us or doesn't smile at us, it can trigger us. Right? We read one social media post, and your day is ruined for 4 hours because some stranger in some other place said something. And there go 4 hours of your life. Right? That is not equanimity. That is being just pulled around on a string, meaning your emotions. And so, flexibility I like. To me, equanimity has a lot to do with balance and just staying centered, calm, kind of even-keeled with regardless of what's happening around us. And I often, you've heard me say this before, but I often refer to Buddhist practices like, the kiddie ride at Disneyland, where so much of our lives, for many people, there's the roller coaster of the extreme highs and then just crashing down extreme low. Right? People make themselves miserable all week, Monday through Friday, doing a bunch of stuff they don't like, just to hit Friday, Saturday, and then there's like this big rush, and then you're crashed, and then you hate, the week again. And the kiddie ride, it's slow. It's not that exciting. But last I checked, nobody gets hurt on it. I'm sure someone's been hurt over the years on the kiddie ride, but, probably the kid's fault, not the ride's fault. Or a parent's fault, or whoever. So, steady, balanced, flexible, sure, just being able to not be moved so much in any direction whatsoever by what occurs. See it for what it actually is, which actually has nothing to do with us. So, yeah. Yeah.
On that same topic, I was talking about this recently with another group, but so it's pretty obvious if you have these extreme highs and extreme lows on the big roller coaster, right? The lows are dangerous. It's obvious that the lows are dangerous. Are those highs dangerous, or are the highs only dangerous because of their relationship to those extreme lows? Can you get lost in the high part?
Yeah, the highs are definitely dangerous because, and again, let me just put this into context for those who might be new. When I use the metaphor of the highs and lows of a roller coaster, I don't necessarily mean like doing crazy stuff and then the opposite of that. But the highs can also be just this rush that we experience, constantly craving, pleasure and enjoyment and happiness, like whatever it is, right? The highs don't have to mean you're doing terrible things.
It could be joy.
It could be joy. And again, I don't want to sound like joy is bad, but can we find joy in everything, even in the pain?
Yeah.
If we can find joy in the pain, then we can enjoy everything of life. Because life is going to include a ton of pain. So, joy is not bad or wrong. It doesn't mean that happiness, we shouldn't, want to be happy. But that constant craving and desire for getting everything we want. Because so much of our happiness comes from what? Getting what we want. And so this practice is to begin to surrender, abandon so much craving and desire. Now again, as the Buddha taught, and you've heard me say this many times, there are healthy cravings and healthy desires. Right? The craving and desire to suffer less, beautiful. Right? Suffering is not fun. So we practice to suffer less. That's a healthy craving, healthy desire. But we want to watch all cravings, all desires, because when we attain something that's joyful, impermanence comes around, and what does it do? We lose it. And then we constantly seek and crave that joy again. So, nothing wrong with attaining happiness and joy, but it's not going to stay forever.
Is it possible to experience that joy at the same level and embrace it, being mindful of impermanence?
So the question is it possible to experience that joy at the same level so then when you lose it, say that last part again?
Well, just as long as you're aware of the this too shall pass, the impermanent, and
yeah, it doesn't mean you can't enjoy. To me, the teachings don't mean you can't enjoy things. But just know that this too shall pass. And it might not come around again. We don't know. We have beautiful interactions, beautiful encounters every moment, every day of our lives. And those moments may never happen again. So a lot of this has to do with having gratitude and appreciation for each moment as it arises. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question about Dharma. You don't talk much about it, but essentially like the idea that we have like some path that we're meant to be on. And this also interrelates with like service, and I've had a career of service like most of my life, and I've been a teacher, a caseworker, these types of things, and I've not seen it be like fulfilling to me. And I'm like, how is this service to people and even my students who are like, this isn't your passion in life, like I can't believe it, just because I'm good at it, right? So I'm like really struggling with like compassion and like selflessness when like it causes misery for me because I like can't afford anything and like have to be around people all the time. And I'm just like, how is this idea of like extreme compassion and service supposed to serve me ever?
There's like 17 questions.
I know.
So let me break that down a little bit. The first few things, which are actually pretty easy, and I think the least important of what you're really getting at here, but the first thing you said was, you asked about Dharma and said that I don't talk about it that much. Just to clarify, Dharma there are two definitions of the word Dharma, right? Dharma in kind of capital D sense, where they refer to it written with a capital D, is ultimate truth, which is beyond our perception. There's our perception of reality, and then there is reality. And Dharma is ultimate truth, not truth spoken by the Buddha, not truth spoken by anybody else, but what's actually happening. You like pizza? Okay, so you take a bite of pizza. Your experience of that is what's happening. Now I say to you, how's the pizza taste? You start telling me about it. That ain't it. That's just your description of it. We view and judge things all day long. That is not ultimate truth. That's our perception of reality, our perception of truth, right? So that's what Dharma with a capital D is, ultimate truth. The other reference of the Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha. So that's what I talk about 99.9% of my life, So everything we're talking about, everything I'm saying around Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, Six Paramitas, all the fancy keywords around, Buddhism, that is the Dharma. Those are the teachings of the Buddha, right? So that's the first part about just kind of clarifying what Dharma is. The second thing around everyone kind of having their, supposed to be on a certain path, you're not supposed to be on any path. You're on your path. And whatever path that is, that's what it is. There's no teachings that say, Buddhist practice is not about destiny and that we're all supposed to be doing something. You're doing whatever the heck you want. You are literally completely free to choose to do and go and say and be anyone and anything that you would like to. Now your mind, your fears, your worries, your attachments will get in the way of that. But you could literally do just about anything except probably fly without like a plane, you know? So you're on your own. Now, when we look at the life of the Buddha, to me, this addresses the third, partially the third, but let me finish this thought. When we look at the life of the Buddha, right, the guy was a prince. All the wealth, all the riches, all the women, all the everything you can imagine, he left all of that for a simple life and had about 7 items. So, you mentioned that, you know, the job, I'll get to that in a second, that you don't like, and, you know, you still don't have enough money, or, you know, whatever it is. Did you eat today? 3 meals? Do you have a car? Did you put gas in it? Do you have an apartment you pay rent at or something like that? You have more than one jacket? You have a lot of shirts and shoes? You're doing okay. Maybe not if you compare yourself to other people. Maybe not if you live in San Diego. You don't have to live in San Diego. There are lots of places in the world that are a lot less expensive than San Diego. But you choose to be here. All of these choices are free for all of us to make. We get afraid, we get scared, we get stuck. We get attached to certain places and people and things, and we don't want to leave them. And we get used to our lifestyle and the sunny beaches and blah, blah, blah. And then, and I'm not picking on you, this is most people, and then we complain. We don't have money, we can't afford stuff, it's so expensive. You know? A friend of mine just went to Oklahoma, it's pretty inexpensive there, I hear. I hear it's nice this time of year. You know? We can go anywhere and do anything, but we don't because we're afraid. Now, the last piece to, you with me so far? Not to agree with me or like what I'm saying, because that's never my concern, but really ask yourself, like, wow, am I free to do what I want? Because the answer to that is yes. You might not do it, but you are free to do it. It might mean you can't have as much of the things I just rattled off that you have, but you could. The third part, about a life of service, right, and being unhappy and not being fulfilled, and then do something else.
Do I have a little follow-up?
You could have as much follow-up as you'd like, yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think service shouldn't be something that you get paid for. Like, service is something you don't intend to have any money from. And I think maybe that's where, like, it gets confusing.
Yeah, without getting too, because I don't get into details anyways, but, you know, without getting too personal details, it sounds like what may be of service to you is no longer enjoyable, and then you're building resentment and anger and frustration because it seems like it should be service, but maybe it's just a job and you're getting money and it's not enough, and now you're wondering why you're doing it and you're still unhappy, and it's supposed to be all, so be of service elsewhere that has nothing to do with money and that you feel good about. And there are a million places and things, as you know, where you can do that. And then maybe balance that with, for a while, the job that you have that maybe you're good at it, but you don't like it, until you realize, like, why am I stuck doing something all day long I don't like? Leave it. You know? So, I don't know if that's helpful at all, but yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
How do you cultivate a sense of joy in your life?
How do I cultivate a sense of joy in my life? You know, it changes daily, but literally today when I was making my bed, you know, my mother just turned 80, had a stroke a little over 4 years ago, and should have died. It's a long story. She's doing great now, but she's in a wheelchair, can't walk, can't move her right side, moves just not all at the same time. She's kind of like a weeble wobble that would wobble and not come back forward. You know, they said she had a 3% chance of living January 13, 2020, and she lived. And but her entire life changed. So, as I'm making my bed this morning, I found joy in the fact that I'm still able to make my bed. Because she can't make hers. And a time will come where those things may happen. So for me, cultivating joy is in a gratitude and appreciation for everything that I'm able and privileged and fortunate enough to be able to do. Like, joy is in the little things, you know? For me, it also with Buddhist practice, what is, and this kind of goes back to, Mark, what you were saying earlier, what was joyful to me maybe 20 years ago, it's very different. Everything that was joyful to me then would cause me so much pain and misery and suffering now. So what is joyful to me is very different. And I think it also ties into the question about, you know, how we spend our days, our livelihood. Can we find joy and appreciation in everything? I mean, you know, I get to sit here with all of you 2 times a week. And how incredible is that? How lucky am I? Like, what is to me, there's nothing better than that, you know? So, yeah. I like joy. Yeah.
So, the Eightfold Path, there's right aspiration. No, what's it called?
Right view, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. Maybe there's a 9th called aspiration, but yeah.
I'm sorry.
I said maybe there's a 9th called aspiration, but
I
yeah.
was reading it.
Yeah.
Could you explain right effort?
Right effort. Yeah, a lot of times with Buddhist kind of teachings and practice, and again, put in a context like this is all Dharma, right? Explain right effort. It's so much easier to explain right effort when I ask you the simple question of, do you know what it's like to be lazy? Yeah. So right effort would be the opposite of that. Super simple. Instead of looking at what is ultimate wisdom, I look at what is complete ignorance. And usually when I'm being ignorant, I know it. So I'm not looking for like, what is ultimate wisdom? I'm just thinking, what am I doing that's dumb that I shouldn't do? By default, that's pretty wise. If you're being lazy and you stop being lazy, by default, you're putting in an effort. But let's look at the word right effort. Not right versus wrong so much, but understanding that there is wisdom, there is intention that also can be applied to effort. What I mean by that is, one example somebody gave years ago I loved was, you know, if you're sitting in Poway right now and you want to go to Mexico and you get on the 15 and start going north, all the effort in the world ain't going to get you there. You're going to be in, you know, the desert before you know it. You have to go east too, but you get my point. So effort is not being lazy, but also with the intention of working towards something that is beneficial towards self and others. We're all really good at watching Netflix for like 10 hours, you know? It's a lot of effort.
It's great effort if you want to know what happens next.
It's great effort. I mean, it requires a lot of effort, you know? And so then the question is the effort that we're putting in, how does that cultivate true, even come back to the question of joy, how is the effort we're putting in really cultivating true joy, true compassion? What is our effort? What is kind of the, I don't want to say the fruits of our labor, but kind of the effort we're putting in, what comes from that? Does it just keep us tied into craving and desire more and more and more? You know? So, does that help? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What else? Other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So, when I meditate, it's hard for me not to have, like, an achievement-oriented mentality. Like, you know, sort of if I do this, then the outcome will be this, and that. And so I found myself tonight really being able to draw my attention back to my breath. But at the same time, you know, I'm an incredibly visual person. So when my eyes close, it's like being inside of an IMAX theater. So how can I observe the sort of visual poetry of my thoughts at the same time of observing my breath? Should those be different practices?
Mm.
And then what about, sort of like visualization practices? Like
Yeah.
they all kind of swirl around like a garden hose that's just spinning like that.
Sure. Yes. I thought it was really beautiful what you said. What was it? Visual poetry, yeah. I was there and then I got lost on the garden hose thing, so I forgot the visual poetry. But I just pictured, is it like Medusa with all the snake heads?
Yes.
Right, so then I just pictured that. The mind, I mean, my mind's a mess. Okay, so a couple things here. In general, to start with, two different types, well, many different types, but two types of meditation practices based on what you just said that I'm hearing. One is more of a guided visual meditation, and one is more just silent sensation of breath. Both good, nothing wrong with either of them, just different, right? Now, I spent like 10 years at the Balboa Medical Center doing meditation, and then Point Loma Naval Base was called Oasis, which was the Navy's first residential treatment program for active military with PTSD or TBI, right? Traumatic brain injuries. And I remember leading a meditation there. And this is a pretty intense crowd. They're coming back from combat. They want to get cleared. Med boards go back. And I remember one time one of the guys said to me, as I was leading the meditation the way I practice, and he said, "Thank you for not telling me that I was going to feel the earth and flowers through my feet." And the reason I bring that up, it just kind of triggered this, is that there are different types for different people. Now, the flip side of that is when you've had a lot of trauma, which a lot of people in this room have, when you sit silently for 30 seconds, for 3 minutes, what are you left with? When you sit silently, what are you left with? Hang on, Nick, right? Was it Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you left with?
I mean, the garden hose of
Okay.
50,000 different things.
The garden was 50,000 different
Memories.
things. Yes. And how difficult is that?
It's pretty difficult.
Yes. And what is there that you need to learn to be with? That. You need to learn, my suggestion, I don't want to say you need to, my suggestion is learn to become friends with the garden hose. It's just a garden hose. And all the stories that are flashing through your mind aren't happening. So we use, in a silent meditation practice, which is, again, that's my personal practice, even though I guide a little bit, but breath in, breath out. Breath in, breath out. Breath in, breath out. Thought arises, recognize it, release it, back to breath. So here's an example. What I want to do during meditation practice, right? Thought arises, recognize it, say it's hunger, release it, back to the breath. Next thought arises, hunger, release it, back to the breath. So there's the garden hose, the thoughts of hunger. I'm seeing, hearing, hunger, release, back to the breath. That's what I want to do. What I don't want to do, thought arises, hunger. I'm hungry. What do I want to eat? I want a burrito. I'm going to go to Pokey's. I want chips, I want cheese, I want sauce. Next thing you know, from one single thought of a burrito, or one single thought of hunger, I'm thinking about a burrito. And 5 minutes later, I'm hungrier than I was 5 minutes ago. So the thoughts are constantly going to come in and out. Just observe them. More important, are you with me so far, right? At least philosophically and intellectually. I think most important, what I heard from your question, is what you said at the beginning, which is it's hard for you to not have some goal-oriented. The first thing I always tell people with meditation practice, abandon any goal whatsoever. Sitting and breathing is just sitting and breathing. Your goal, if anything, should just be, can I keep breathing? Now, if you stop breathing, you don't have to worry about anything else, right? But abandon the goal. It's a mistake that so many people make when they come into meditation practice is they think they're going to get better. Your mind is going to be a mess for the rest of your life. Okay? Let's just start there. Can you learn to be kind with that and be okay with that and not allow that to destroy you? The problem isn't the mind. The problem is what you do from the mind. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, this really ties back to what you opened your talk with, which was the teachings themselves
Yeah.
are sort of independent of the person. Because Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, I mean, he's a problematic figure. So is Alan Watts.
Yeah.
You know, died of alcoholism. He's
Yeah.
one of my heroes, and I'm a
Yeah.
recovering alcoholic.
Yeah.
So how can I listen to the teacher? Because I want the teacher to embody, you know,
Yeah.
whatever the teachings are. But
Yeah, you should stop that, right? You should stop wanting the teacher to embody anything. You gotta stop, you need to stop worshiping people. Stop looking for someone else to save you and fix you and heal you. You created your mess. You can fix your mess. Very rarely have I met somebody who's had more of a mess of a mind than mine, right? My mess of a mind has not been fixed or healed or changed. I've learned to observe it and not act on it. Three of my favorite teachers, Alan Watts, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and Kerouac.
hence the name.
They were all terrible in the way they lived and acted. Their teachings were beautiful. You sure did pick a pretty decent crop of people to try to, you know, put on a pedestal. Don't do that to them. That's not fair to them either. In fact, we don't have time for this now, I'm going to wrap up, but part of the putting the people on the pedestals that you learn from, don't do that to them. They're just human, right? Don't look for somebody to save you and fix you. Learn to love Nick. Learn to appreciate you for all the mess and all the joy and all the happiness and all the sorrow and all your experiences. And learn to be okay and sit with that mind. And not try to run from it. Because you can have all those thoughts in there. They're just thoughts. You know, I can tell you've read enough, you've been around it enough. You've heard every metaphor, the clouds passing by, the airplane getting louder and fading away. But my suggestion, since I've known you all of like 3 minutes, right, is stop trying to be someone else. And just learn to love yourself for all the shit you've done, which is a lot, right? You're human. So, ironically, the people that you seem to worship and idolize so much, you might even be a better human than they are. And yet you're putting them on a pedestal because they taught Buddhism for however many years. Maybe try putting yourself on a pedestal once. Look how much you've had to fight to get through to where you are right now. You ever stop and be proud of that? You ever have joy in that?
Not really.
That's where you start. Shatter the pedestal, but if you've got to put somebody on it, you deserve to put yourself on it once in a while. And then, when your ego gets too big, shatter that. Does that help?
You have no idea how much that has helped.
Good.
Wow.
Thank you. I'm really just talking to myself. So, I appreciate it. I'm going to close with that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, before you all head out, our Dharma Bum host Meredith has a few announcements for us. Thanks, Meredith.
Hi everyone, I'm tonight's host Meredith. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and is also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. If you would please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out, that would be very helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.